They called it the graveyard shift, not because of the hours, but because of the survival rate. On the dark web forums where nannies discuss their worst nightmares, the Vane estate in upstate New York was a legend. The pay was 6 figures tax-free. The catch: you had to sign an NDA that was thicker than a Bible, and you were serving Silas Vane. A man whispered to be the oldest vampire in North America. 17 nannies fled in 6 months. 2 went missing. Everyone said his twins were unteachable monsters. But then came Tessa Reynolds. She didn't bring holy water or stakes. She brought something much more dangerous to a house built on fear boundaries. This isn't a fairy tale. This is the true story of the only human who didn't just survive the monster. She brought him to his knees. The rain in Seattle always felt personal, but on that Tuesday in November 2014, it felt like a warning. Tessa Reynolds sat in the plush leather chair of a law firm that smelled of mahogany and old money. Across from her sat Mr. Sterling, a man whose skin was so pale it looked like parchment paper stretched over a skull. He wasn't a vampire. Tessa knew enough about the hidden world to recognize a familiar when she saw one, but he was close enough to the darkness to make the hair on her arms stand up. $75,000 for a 3-month trial period, Sterling said, sliding a black folder across the glass table. Plus a completion bonus of $50,000 if you survive the tenure. Tessa didn't blink at the word survive. She couldn't afford to. At 26, she was drowning in medical debt from her father's last surgeries. The collectors were calling 3 times a day. She needed a miracle, and the Vane estate was offering one wrapped in red tape. "I've handled difficult children, Mr. Sterling," Tessa said, her voice steady. "I worked in the crisis ward at St. Jude's for 4 years, screaming, biting, throwing furniture. I've seen it all." Sterling smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Miss Reynolds, with all due respect to the human condition, you have dealt with traumatized children. You have not dealt with the Vane twins. Leo and Mia are unique." "They are 7 years old," Tessa countered. "They are 7 years old," Sterling agreed. "And they are pure bloods. Their mother passed during childbirth. Their father, Mr. Silas Vane, is a man of significant power and very little patience. The previous nanny lasted 4 hours. She left via a 2nd-story window, without opening it." Tessa swallowed hard. She looked at the contract. Clause 14 caught her eye. The employee acknowledges that minor physical injury is a workplace hazard. The employer is not liable for blood loss under 1 pint. 1 pint, she whispered. "Standard clause." Sterling waved a hand dismissively. "Do we have a deal?" Tessa thought of the final notice letter sitting on her kitchen counter. She thought of her dad's old watch she'd pawned last week. She picked up the heavy fountain pen. "I'll pack my bags," she said. The Vane estate was located 3 hours outside the city, hidden behind iron gates that looked like they hadn't been opened since the Victorian era. The house itself was a monstrosity of Gothic architecture spires, gargoyles, and dark stone that seemed to absorb the moonlight. When the town car dropped her off, there was no welcoming committee. The front door, a slab of dark oak, creaked open to reveal a cavernous foyer. It was freezing. "Hello," Tessa called out, her voice echoing. Movement flickered in the shadows of the grand staircase. Tessa looked up. Perched on the banister 10 feet above the ground were 2 children. They were identical, with hair the color of spilled ink and eyes that glowed with a faint, unsettling violet hue. "She smells like vanilla," the boy Leo whispered. He didn't speak to her. He spoke about her. "She smells like fear," the girl Mia corrected. Her voice was melodic but cold, lacking the chaotic energy of a human child. "I can hear you both," Tessa said, dropping her duffel bag with a heavy thud. She decided right then that she wouldn't play the prey. She put her hands on her hips. "Get down from there. It's unsafe." The twins tilted their heads in perfect unison. It was terrifying. "Unsafe." Leo laughed, a sound that was too deep for a 7-year-old. He let go of the banister. He didn't fall. He floated, defying gravity for a split second before landing silently on the marble floor in a crouch. Mia followed, landing beside him like a cat. "We don't get hurt," Mia said, stepping closer. "We hurt." "Is that so?" Tessa knelt down so she was eye level with them. It was a risk exposing her throat to predators, but it was a calculated one. "Well, I don't get hurt either. I get annoyed, and I'm very tired from the drive. So we can do the scary monster routine, or you can show me to my room." The twins paused. They exchanged a look of genuine confusion. The nannies usually screamed by now. Before they could respond, the temperature in the room dropped another 10 degrees. The shadows in the hallway seemed to coalesce into a solid form. Silas Vane walked into the light. He was taller than Tessa expected, well over 6 feet, wearing a suit that cost more than her entire education. His face was arrestingly beautiful, sharp angles and high cheekbones, but his eyes were the color of a winter storm grey, turbulent and utterly void of warmth. "You must be the new expendable," Silas said. His voice was like velvet over gravel. "Tessa Reynolds." She stood up, extending a hand. Silas looked at her hand with distaste, then back at her face. He didn't shake it. "Mr. Sterling says you have a background in behavioral therapy. I assume this means you think you can analyze my children." "I think I can raise them," Tessa said, retracting her hand slowly. "Which seems to be something you're struggling with." The silence that followed was deafening. Leo and Mia gasped. Silas stepped closer, invading her personal space. He smelled of rain-old parchment and copper. "You are brave, Miss Reynolds, or stupid. My children do not need raising. They need containing until they come of age. Your job is to ensure they do not kill the staff or burn down the West Wing. Do not attempt to parent them. Do not attempt to love them. And do not under any circumstances disturb me in my study before sunset." He turned on his heel, his coat billowing behind him. "If you survive, the night breakfast is at 7 p.m. He vanished into the shadows. Tessa looked down at the twins who were staring at her with wide eyes. "Well," Tessa exhaled, picking up her bag. "Your dad seems like a ray of sunshine. Who wants to show me the kitchen? I'm starving." The first night was always the test. Tessa knew this from the case files Sterling had let her read. Nanny number 4 had been locked in the cellar. Nanny number 9 had woken up with a colony of bats in her bed. Tessa's room was luxurious but cold. It had a 4-poster bed and a heavy lock on the door. She didn't use it. If she locked the door, she was telling them she was afraid. Instead, she left it slightly ajar, unpacked her few belongings, and set up a small Bluetooth speaker on the nightstand. At 2:00 a.m., the attack began. It wasn't subtle. The windows of her bedroom blew open with a violent crash. A gust of wind swirled into the room, knocking over a vase and extinguishing the lamps. In the center of the room, Leo and Mia stood. Their eyes were glowing bright purple now, their fangs fully extended. They hissed a guttural sound meant to trigger primal panic in any human. "Get her out!" Leo shrieked, his voice distorted. "This is our house. Fresh blood. Fresh blood." Mia lunged, grabbing Tessa's suitcase and hurling it across the room. It smashed into the wall, spilling clothes everywhere. Most people would have run. The red protocol in the employee handbook said to retreat to the panic room in the basement. Tessa didn't move. She sat on the edge of her bed, watching them destroy her belongings. She waited until Mia ripped a pillow in half, feathers exploding like snow. "Are you quite done?" Tessa asked. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the noise. The twins froze. Tessa stood up and walked over to the Bluetooth speaker. She pressed play. A soft, rhythmic, lo-fi beat filled the room. Then she walked over to the window and closed it, latching it firmly. "You broke my favorite vase," Tessa said, picking up a shard of pottery. "And you made a mess of these feathers. Do you know how hard it is to get our feathers out of a rug?" "We could kill you," Leo growled, though he looked uncertain. "We are predators. You're 7, Tessa said, turning to face them. "And right now you're cranky. When was the last time you ate—" "We drink blood," Mia shouted. "We don't eat. Write synthetic hemoglobin substitute, I read the file. But when did you last have it?" The twins looked at each other. "Dinner," Leo muttered. "That was 6 hours ago. You're growing boys and girls. Vampires or not, you have metabolisms. You're having a sugar crash. Or a blood crash." Tessa walked past them, ignoring the fangs inches from her neck. She went to her bag, the one Mia hadn't thrown, and pulled out 2 juice boxes. "It's pomegranate," she lied. It was actually Type O synthetic she had found in the kitchen fridge earlier, and poured into juice boxes she brought with her. She knew psychology. If it looked like a kid's drink, they'd resist. If it looked like her drink, they'd want it. "I was saving these for myself," she sighed. "But since you made such a mess, I suppose you need the energy to help me clean it up." She tossed the boxes. Their vampire reflexes kicked in instantly. Leo caught his mid-air. Mia snatched hers before it hit the bed. They sniffed it. Their eyes widened. "Drink," Tessa commanded. They tore into the boxes, draining them in seconds, as the nutrient-dense fluid hit their systems. The purple glow in their eyes faded. The fangs retracted. Their shoulders slumped. "Better?" Tessa asked. Leo wiped his mouth. He looked at the feathers on the floor. He looked at Tessa, who was calmly folding a sweater Mia had thrown. "Why aren't you screaming?" Mia asked, her voice small again. "Everyone screams." Tessa sat down on the floor amidst the feathers. "Because screaming gives you power. And in this room, you don't have power over me. You have a partnership. Now help me pick up these feathers, and I'll read you the story about the Hobbit." "We don't like stories." Leo crossed his arms. "Have you ever heard one? Father says fiction is a waste of intellect." "Your father?" Tessa said, picking up a handful of feathers. "Sounds like he needs a juice box, too." Mia giggled. It was a rusty, unused sound, but it was there. For the next hour, the impossible happened. The Vampire King's feral twins were on their hands and knees, picking up feathers. When the room was clean, they didn't leave. They sat on the rug watching Tessa as she opened a battered paperback copy of The Hobbit. She read for 20 minutes. By the time she reached the part about the dragon, Mia was leaning against Tessa's knee. Leo was lying on his back, staring at the ceiling, listening intently. Suddenly, the heavy oak door creaked open. Silas stood there. He had sensed the spike in energy, the aggression, the red protocol breach. He had come expecting to find a corpse, or at least a hysterical woman demanding her severance pay. Instead, he saw his children, the monsters who had terrorized the supernatural community, sitting quietly on the floor, while a human woman in flannel pajamas did a voice impression of a dwarf. Tessa looked up, meeting his stunned gaze. She didn't stop reading. She simply held up a finger, signaling him to wait. Silas Vane, the scourge of the East Coast. The King of the Night Court stood frozen in the doorway. He had never been shushed in 400 years. He watched as Tessa finished the chapter, closed the book, and looked at the twins. Bedtime. For real this time. If I see glowing eyes again tonight. No chapter 2 tomorrow. Leo and Mia stood up. They didn't bow to their father. They didn't hiss. "Good night, Tessa," Mia mumbled. "Night," Leo said. They walked past their father as if he were a piece of furniture and went to their rooms down the hall. Silas remained in the doorway, his eyes fixed on Tessa. The air crackled with tension. "You," Silas said, his voice low and dangerous, "are playing a dangerous game, Miss Reynolds. They are not pets to be tamed with tricks." "They aren't pets, Mr. Vane." Tessa stood up, brushing a stray feather off her pajamas. "They're lonely children, and they were hungry. Maybe if you monitored their glucose levels as closely as you monitor their perimeter security, you'd get more sleep." Silas narrowed his eyes. He took a step into the room. The door slammed shut behind him, locked by his will alone. "Do not presume to lecture me on their biology," he hissed, closing the distance between them in a blur of motion. He was suddenly inches from her, his hand slamming onto the wall beside her head. He was terrifyingly beautiful up close, a masterpiece of rage. "You survived one night. Do not mistake luck for competence." "It wasn't luck," Tessa whispered, refusing to flinch, though her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She knew he could hear it. It was empathy. "Try it sometime." Silas stared at her. He could hear the rush of her blood, smell the adrenaline spiking in her veins. She was terrified, yet she stood her ground. It was intoxicating. He pushed off the wall, straightening his suit. "Clean this room properly tomorrow," he said coldly. "And Miss Reynolds, yes, the juice boxes were a clever trick. But if you ever feed them human food, I will drain you myself." He vanished, leaving only the scent of rain and the echo of his threat. Tessa let out a breath she had been holding for 10 minutes. Her legs gave out, and she sank onto the bed. She had survived. But as she looked at the empty doorway, she realized something worse. She wasn't just afraid of him. She was fascinated. Week 2 at the Vane estate wasn't about survival anymore. It was about warfare. But not the kind involving fangs and claws. Tessa was waging a war against the gloom. The Vane household operated on a nocturnal schedule, which was fine for vampires, but terrible for a human circadian rhythm. Tessa compromised. She woke at noon, prepped the twins' day school lessons, which they despised, and forced them to engage in non-lethal activities until Silas woke at sunset. On Tuesday of the second week, the war moved to the kitchen. The estate's chef was a thrall named Grigori, a human servant bound to the family who hadn't spoken a word since 1990. He cooked exclusively raw meats and blood reductions. Tessa walked in, tying an apron over her jeans. "Grigori, take the night off. I'm making lasagna." Grigori stared at her with dead eyes. "Go." Tessa pointed to the door. "Watch some TV. Relax, I've got this." Confused but compelled by her sheer audacity, the thrall left. When Silas descended the grand staircase at 8:00 p.m., he stopped dead. The usual smell of iron and ozone was gone. The house smelled of garlic, roasted tomatoes, and melting mozzarella. He tracked the scent to the dining room. The long mahogany table, usually bare, was set with placemats. Leo and Mia were seated, looking bewildered, poking at plates of steaming pasta. "What?" Silas said, his voice dropping the temperature in the room by 5 degrees. "Is this lasagna?" Tessa said, walking in with a salad bowl. "And garlic bread. Before you ask, yes, there is garlic. No, it won't kill you. That's a myth from the 1800s, written by a vampire who just hated Italian food. I checked the library archives." Silas stared at the plate in front of his usual seat. There was a glass of deep red liquid beside it. Grade A, synthetic, warmed to 98.6 degrees. "I do not eat human food," Silas said, his lip curling. "The twins need carbohydrates," Tessa argued, ignoring his menacing aura. "They were jittery yesterday, and you need to set an example. You don't have to eat it, but you have to sit with us. It's called a family dinner. It's a thing people do to stop their children from becoming sociopaths." Leo looked at his father. "It's actually gooey," the boy admitted. "Tessa says the cheese is like edible plastic." "Eat the plastic, Leo," Tessa corrected. Silas glared at Tessa. He could snap her neck before she could blink. He could glamour her into walking into the ocean. But as he looked at Mia, he saw something he hadn't seen in years: curiosity. She wasn't looking at the door, waiting to escape. She was looking at him, waiting to see what he would do. Silas pulled out his chair and sat. The wood groaned. "Fine," he said. The dinner was excruciatingly silent for 3 minutes. "So," Tessa said, stabbing a cherry tomato. "Silas, how was your day? Or night? What exactly do you do? I assume it's not just brooding on gargoyles." Silas took a sip of the warm blood, his eyes never leaving her face. "I manage assets, real estate, tech investments, and I police the treaty lines between our kind and the lichens in the north." "Werewolves?" Tessa nodded. "Cool. Leo, don't play with your food." "They smell like wet dogs," Leo said, wrinkling his nose. "They are savage beasts," Silas corrected, "and they are encroaching on our territory." "Maybe they just want lasagna," Tessa muttered. Silas choked. It was a brief, microscopic cough, but it was there. He looked at her with genuine bewilderment. "You treat the supernatural world as if it were a suburban homeowners association dispute." "Isn't it?" Tessa challenged. "Boundaries, noise complaints, dietary restrictions. It's all just politics with sharper teeth." Silas leaned forward. The candlelight caught the sharp planes of his face, making him look devastatingly handsome. "You have no idea what you are mocking, Tessa. The things that live in the dark are not worried about noise complaints. We are worried about extinction." "Is that why you're so afraid of them?" Tessa gestured to the twins. The table went silent. Leo dropped his fork. "Excuse me," Silas's voice was a low growl. "You keep them locked up. You don't touch them. You treat them like ticking time bombs. That's fear, Silas. You're terrified of your own children." Silas stood up so abruptly, his chair fell backward with a crash. His eyes flashed a violent crimson. "You overstep, Miss Reynolds. You are here to ensure they survive. You are not here to psychoanalyze me." "Someone has to," she shot back, standing up to meet him. She was 5'4". He was 6'3". The size difference was comical, but her spirit filled the gap. "Because right now you're not a father. You're a warden." Silas hissed a true animalistic sound that made Tessa's primal brain scream. "Run." "Leave," he commanded. "Now." Tessa didn't run. She walked. She picked up the empty lasagna pan, turned her back on the apex predator of the eastern seaboard, and walked into the kitchen. As the door swung shut, she heard Mia's small voice. "I liked the garlic bread, Father." Tessa leaned against the kitchen counter, her hands shaking uncontrollably. She had pushed him too far. She was going to be fired. or eaten. But an hour later, when she went to collect the dishes, the dining room was empty. Silas's glass was empty, and on his plate the lasagna had been cut into small, precise squares. He hadn't eaten it, but he had engaged with it. It was a concession. A sticky note was left on the table in elegant calligraphy-style handwriting. "Do not serve garlic again. It ruins the palate of the vintage." Tessa smiled. She pinned the note to her chest like a medal of honor. By the third week, Tessa felt she had a handle on the routine, but the Vane estate had secrets that lasagna couldn't fix. There was a hallway on the third floor, the east wing, that was always cold. Not just drafty spiritually cold. The shadows there seemed to move against the light. The twins refused to go near it. "That's where Mother died," Leo had told her once, his voice trembling. "Father says the air is poison there." Tessa respected the boundary until the storm hit. It was a blizzard typical for upstate New York in December. The power flickered and died around midnight. The backup generators kicked in, but the house groaned under the weight of the wind. Tessa was in the library, with the twins playing a board game by candlelight, when a sound echoed through the house. It was a scream, not a human scream, and not a vampire hiss. It was a wail of pure, agonizing grief. "What was that?" Tessa asked, dropping the dice. The twins were pale, their eyes wide and black. "It's the weeping woman," Mia whispered. "She comes when the storm is loud." "Is it a ghost?" Tessa grabbed her flashlight. "It's coming from the east wing," Leo said, clutching Tessa's arm. "Don't go. Father forbids it." "Your father isn't here," Tessa said. Silas was out on perimeter duty, hunting a pack of lichens that had been spotted near the border. "And I'm not letting anyone cry alone in a house this big." Tessa, no. But Tessa was already moving. She grabbed a heavy iron poker from the fireplace, useless against a ghost. But it made her feel better, and headed up the stairs. The east wing was freezing. Her breath came out in white puffs. The wailing grew louder, coming from the very end of the hall, behind a set of double doors carved with roses. Tessa pushed the doors open. She expected a bedroom. Instead, she found a nursery. It was preserved in time. A crib made of white wood, a rocking chair, and shelves lined with soft plush toys. But everything was covered in a thick layer of grey dust. In the center of the room stood a painting. It was a portrait of a woman. She was breathtaking, long, raven hair, eyes the same violet as the twins, and a smile that looked sad even in oil paint. Standing in front of the painting was not a ghost. It was Silas. He was on his knees, his back to Tessa. His coat was torn, and blood, dark, black vampire blood, was soaking through his shirt. He wasn't wailing. The sound had stopped the moment she entered. "Silas," Tessa whispered. He turned slowly. His face was a mask of exhaustion. His eyes were dull. The grey storms within them quieted by pain. He held a small silver music box in his bloodied hands. "I told you," he rasped, "never to come here." Tessa dropped the poker. "You're hurt." "A lichen alpha." He winced, trying to stand but stumbling. "Got a lucky swipe." Tessa rushed forward, catching him before he hit the floor. He was heavy like marble and freezing cold. The heat radiating from his wound was alarming. "We need to get you to the infirmary," Tessa said, gritting her teeth as she supported his weight. "No," Silas growled. "Leave me. If I lose control, the bloodlust—" "Shut up, Silas," Tessa said, maneuvering him toward the rocking chair. "I'm not leaving you to bleed out in a dusty nursery." She tore the hem of her flannel shirt. "This is going to hurt." She pressed the cloth against the 3 deep claw marks on his torso. Silas roared his fangs, extending his eyes flashing red. He grabbed her wrist, his grip crushing. "I could kill you." He breathed, his face inches from hers. The scent of her blood, fresh human alive, was overwhelming him. "I am starving, Tessa. Run." Tessa didn't pull away. She looked into his red eyes. She saw the monster, yes, but she also saw the man who came to sit in his dead wife's nursery when he was in there. "You won't kill me," she said softly. "How do you know?" "Because you didn't kill the twins when they broke your vase, and you didn't kill me when I served you garlic." She moved her hand, gently wiping a streak of blood from his cheek. "And because you're not the monster you pretend to be to scare everyone away." Silas stared at her. The red in his eyes receded, returning to that turbulent grey. His grip on her wrist loosened his thumb, grazing her pulse point. "You are a foolish woman," he whispered, but he leaned into her touch. "What happened to her?" Tessa asked, glancing at the portrait. "The twins say she died in childbirth." Silas closed his eyes. "That is the lie I tell them. It is kinder." "What is the truth?" Silas looked at the painting. Her name was Isadora. She was not just a vampire. She was a spell weaver. Rare. Powerful. He took a ragged breath. She was researching a cure. A cure for vampirism. No. A cure for the blood madness. It is a genetic defect in our line. It is why the twins are volatile. It usually manifests in adolescence. It turns us into mindless beasts. I have it under control through sheer will and age. But the twins... He looked at Tessa with a despair so deep it broke her heart. They will succumb to it. Isadora found a way to stop it. A ritual. But the Council, the Vampire High Council, found out. They believe our savagery makes us strong. They didn't want a cure. Tessa gasped. They killed her. They sent an assassin. Silas said, his voice cold as ice. On the night the twins were born, Isadora used her last ounce of magic to shield the children. She died protecting them. And the research, the cure, was lost. So you keep them locked up, Tessa realized. Not because you're ashamed of them, but because you're hiding them. If the Council knows the twins survived, if they know Isadora's blood runs in them, they will come for them, to finish the job. Silas looked at Tessa, his defenses completely shattered. I am not a warden, Tessa. I am a fortress, and I am failing. Tessa looked at the portrait, then back to the powerful broken man in front of her. The contract, the NDA, the money, none of it mattered anymore. She took his hand, intertwining her warm fingers with his cold ones. You're not failing, she said fiercely, but you can't be a fortress alone. Even castles have garrisons. Silas looked at their joined hands. For the first time in centuries, he felt a spark of warmth that didn't come from blood. And who will stand with the monster? He asked. A human nanny with a juice box. Tessa smiled. I've handled worse. I worked the night shift at the ER during a full moon. The High Council doesn't scare me. Silas let out a low, dry chuckle. He brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles. It was a gesture of old-world courtliness, startlingly intimate. Then God help them, Silas murmured against her skin. Suddenly the doors to the nursery slammed open. Leo and Mia stood there. But they weren't scared anymore. Their eyes were glowing with a terrifying, synchronized violet light. They were looking past Tessa, past Silas, towards the window. Father, Leo said, his voice resonating with a strange harmonic power. "They are here." Silas stood up instantly, ignoring his wound. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by the lethal grace of the king. "Who?" Silas demanded. "The bad men," Mia said. "The ones who smell like ash." Silas cursed. He grabbed Tessa by the shoulders. "The council found us. The storm masked their approach." He shoved her toward the twins. "Take them to the panic room. Lock it from the inside. Do not open it unless you hear my voice." "What about you?" Tessa cried. Silas turned toward the door, his claws extending, a sword appearing in his hand from seemingly nowhere. "I'm going to remind them," Silas said, "why I am called the king." He looked back at her one last time. "Protect them, Tessa, please." Then he was gone, a blur of shadow moving to meet the invaders. Tessa didn't hesitate. She grabbed the twins' hands. "Run, now!" But as they sprinted into the hallway, the glass of the skylight above them shattered. 3 figures in black tactical gear dropped from the ceiling, blocking their path. They weren't humans. They were vampires, their faces covered in silver masks. "The spawn," one of them hissed. "And the human pet." Tessa shoved the twins behind her. She had no weapons. She had no magic. She had a flashlight and a poker she had left in the nursery. But she remembered Clause 14b. Minor physical injury is a workplace hazard. "You guys picked the wrong house," Tessa said, her voice shaking but loud. She didn't know how she was going to fight 3 ancient vampires. But she knew one thing. No nanny lasted with the Vampire King's twins. But she wasn't just a nanny anymore. She was family. And family fights dirty. The hallway was narrow, a kill box designed by the architect of the Vane estate to funnel invaders. Unfortunately, right now, Tessa and the twins were the ones in the funnel. The 3 assassins moved with a fluid, liquid grace that made human movement look jerky and clumsy. They didn't run. They flowed. Their silver masks gleamed in the flickering emergency lights, devoid of expression. "Give us the abominations," the center assassin hissed. His voice sounded like dry leaves skittering on ointment. "And we will grant you a quick death, human." Tessa stood in front of Leo and Mia, her arms spread wide. Her heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs, loud enough for them to hear. She had no weapons. She had a flashlight and a heavy iron poker. But she had something else. She had spent 3 weeks cleaning this house. She knew every squeaky floorboard, every draft, and every hazard. "Leo, Mia," Tessa said, her voice trembling but clear. "Do you remember the game we played? The floor is lava." The twins, peeking from behind her legs, blinked their glowing violet eyes. "Yes," Leo whispered. "On my mark," Tessa said, gripping the poker with sweating palms. "The floor is lava. Go for the chandelier." The assassins laughed. It was a cold, metallic sound. "You think a child's game will save you." The leader lunged, claws extending like switchblades. "Now!" Tessa screamed. She swung the iron poker not at the assassin, but at the wall beside her. She smashed the glass cover of the fire alarm pull station and yanked the handle down. The reaction was instantaneous. The emergency strobes flared blindingly bright and erratic. A high-pitched swan wailed, disorienting the sensitive auditory nerves of the vampires. But the real weapon was the sprinkler system. Water hissed down from the ceiling in a torrent. "Holy water!" the assassin shrieked, recoiling, covering his face. "Tap water!" Tessa shouted. "But the floor is marble." The sleek, polished marble floor of the hallway, now soaked, became an ice rink. The assassin, moving at supersonic speed, couldn't adjust his momentum. He slipped, his feet flying out from under him, and he crashed heavily into the wall with a sickening crunch of bone. Meanwhile, Leo and Mia hadn't slipped. At Tessa's command, Leo had focused his gravity-defying power. He and Mia shot upward, grabbing onto the heavy brass chandelier, hanging 10 feet above, perching there like gargoyles. "Get her!" the second assassin roared, finding his footing and lunging for Tessa. Tessa dropped to her knees, sliding on the wet floor, barely dodging the claw that swiped the air where her throat had been a second ago. She slid past him, scrambling toward the linen closet at the end of the hall. She kicked the door open and grabbed the industrial-sized spray bottle she used for mold. Bleach. She spun around. The assassin was on her. He grabbed her by the throat, lifting her off the ground. His silver mask was inches from her face. She could smell the decay on his breath. "You are annoying," he growled, squeezing. Black spots danced in Tessa's vision. "And you," she choked out, raising the bottle. "Have terrible." She squeezed the trigger, spraying a stream of concentrated bleach directly into the eye slits of his mask. The assassin howled, dropping her. The chemical burned his heightened senses like acid. He clawed at his face, staggering back. "Mia!" Tessa gasped, clutching her bruised throat. "Do it!" From the chandelier. Mia's eyes glowed a blinding purple. She didn't use force. She used fear. She projected a nightmare. The blinded assassin suddenly stopped screaming. He froze, staring at empty air. "No," he whispered, trembling. "The sun. Not the sun." He curled into a ball on the wet floor, sobbing, paralyzed by a hallucination of being burned alive. That left the leader. He had recovered from the slip. He stood up, water dripping from his tactical gear, his eyes burning red through the slits of his mask. He looked at his fallen comrades, then at Tessa. "Clever," he said, stepping over the body of the first assassin. "But tricks have limits." He moved too fast for Tessa to react. One moment he was 10 feet away. The next he had her pinned against the wall, his hand crushing her shoulder. The pain was blinding. Tessa cried out, dropping the bleach bottle. "I'm going to drain you slowly," he whispered, leaning in. "And make the children watch." Tessa squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the bite. Thwack! The sound was wet and heavy. The pressure on her shoulder vanished. Tessa opened her eyes. The assassin was still standing there, but he looked confused. Slowly he looked down. A long silver sword was protruding from his chest. The blade glowed with ancient runes. Behind him, Silas Vane stood. He was a mess. His suit was in tatters. His hair plastered to his forehead with rain and blood. But he looked like an avenging angel. With a snarl, Silas ripped the sword upward. The assassin dissolved into ash before he even hit the ground. Silas didn't look at the pile of ash. He dropped the sword and grabbed Tessa's face with both hands. His touch was frantic, searching. "Tessa." He breathed, his eyes scanning her for injuries. "Did they bite you? Did they taste you?" "I'm okay," Tessa stammered, shaking uncontrollably now that the adrenaline was fading. "Just my shoulder." Silas looked up at the chandelier. "Leo. Mia. Down. Now." The twins floated down, landing softly on the wet floor. They rushed to Tessa, burying their faces in her wet flannel shirt. "We did it, Tessa," Leo sobbed. "We played the game." "You did great," Tessa whispered, stroking their wet hair. She looked at Silas. "You came back." "I heard you scream," Silas said. His voice was rough, raw. "I would have burned the world to get back to this hallway." He scooped up Mia in one arm, grabbed Tessa's hand with the other, and signaled Leo to follow. "We are not safe here," Silas said, stepping over the ash pile. "The perimeter is breached. We move to the vault." The vault was not a bank safe. It was a panic room built beneath the wine cellar, lined with lead and consecrated silver. It was impenetrable by magic or technology. For an hour, the only sounds were the hum of the air filtration system and the rustle of bandages. Tessa sat on a cot, wincing as Silas tended to her shoulder. He had stripped off his ruined jacket and rolled up his sleeves, revealing forearms that were scarred from centuries of battles. His hands, usually so cold, felt fever-hot against her skin. "It is a bruise," Silas murmured, applying a salve that smelled of herbs and magic. "Nothing broken. You are remarkably durable." "I drink a lot of milk," Tessa joked weakly. Silas didn't smile. He finished bandaging her, and then walked to the far side of the small room, pacing like a caged tiger. The twins were asleep on the other cot, exhausted by the use of their magic. "How did they get in?" Tessa asked quietly. "You said the wards were ancient. Unbreakable." Silas stopped pacing. He leaned against the steel wall, crossing his arms. "The wards are keyed to the bloodline. Only a vein can invite someone in without triggering the alarms, or someone with the key codes," Tessa finished. "Yes, but only 2 people have those codes. Myself and my solicitor." "Mr. Sterling," Tessa frowned. "The guy who hired me. He looks like a stiff breeze would knock him over. He's not an assassin." "No." Silas's eyes darkened. "He is worse. He is a broker. He sells secrets." Silas reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, crushed device. He had taken it off the leader of the assassins. He placed it on the table between them. "I checked the frequency," Silas said. "This comms unit was transmitting our location in real time, but it wasn't sending the signal to the High Council. Who was it sending to? A private server in Zurich, one owned by a shell company." Silas looked at her, his expression grim. "Sterling isn't working for the Council. He's working for someone who wants the twins for research." Tessa felt a chill that had nothing to do with the damp cellar. "The cure," she realized. "Isadora's research. Sterling knows. He must have found Isadora's old journals in the archives," Silas said, clenching his fists. "He doesn't want to kill them. He wants to harvest them, to synthesize the spell-weaver blood." "That puts a price on their heads higher than any bounty," Tessa said. "Silas, we can't stay here. If Sterling knows the layout, nowhere in the estate is safe." "I know." Silas looked at the sleeping children. For a moment, the king looked incredibly old and incredibly tired. "I have a safe house in London. A sanctuary. We leave tonight." He turned to Tessa. "I will arrange a car for you." Tessa blinked. "A car to where? To the airport. To Seattle. To anywhere but here." Silas walked over to her, his grey eyes intense. "You have fulfilled your contract, Tessa. You survived. You protected them. I will wire $12 million to your account. You will never have to work again." Tessa stood up, ignoring the throbbing in her shoulder. "You're firing me. I am saving you." Silas exploded, his voice echoing in the small room. "Do you not understand? These were scouts. Next time they will send an army. They will burn everything I touch. I cannot watch you die, Tessa." The confession hung in the air. "I cannot watch you die." Tessa stepped closer to him. She could see the fear in his eyes, not fear of the enemy, but fear of loss. He had lost Isadora. He couldn't handle losing again. "You can't pay me to leave Silas," Tessa said softly. "Why not?" he demanded. "It is a fortune." "Because I quit," she said. Silas looked stunned. What? I quit being your employee, so you can't fire me. She took another step, closing the distance between them. She reached out and took his hand. But I'm not leaving. You said it yourself. You need a garrison. Well, look at me. She gestured to her wet, muddy clothes and the bandage on her shoulder. I just took out a highly trained vampire assassin with a spray bottle of Clorox and a sprinkler system. You think you're going to find someone else who can do that on LinkedIn? Silas stared at her. A laugh bubbled up in his chest, a sound of pure disbelief. You are insane. I'm invested, she corrected. I love them, Silas. I love those weird, creepy, wonderful kids. She paused, looking up at him. And I think I'm starting to fall for their dad, too. Which is really inconvenient given the circumstances. Silas went still. His pupils dilated, swallowing the grey iris. He looked at her mouth, then her eyes. Tessa. He groaned, a sound of defeat and longing. He moved. It wasn't the predatory blur of the vampire. It was the desperate reach of a man. He pulled her against him, burying his hands in her hair, and kissed her. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a collision. It tasted of rain, adrenaline, and desperation. It was the kiss of two people standing on the edge of a cliff, deciding to jump together. Tessa wrapped her good arm around his neck, pulling him closer. He felt like stone and fire. For a moment, the war outside didn't matter. The assassins. Sterling, the council, it all faded. Silas pulled back, resting his forehead against hers. He was breathing heavily, his heart sinking with hers. If you stay, he whispered, his voice rough, there is no going back. You become an enemy of the council. You become a target. There will be no peace. I never liked peace anyway, Tessa whispered back. It's boring. Silas closed his eyes, a look of profound relief washing over his features. Then pack your bags, Miss Reynolds. We are going to London. One condition, Tessa said, pulling back slightly. Name it. Anything. Except garlic. We're not just running, Tessa said, her eyes hard. Sterling betrayed us. He sold out the kids. We're going to London to regroup. But then, she looked at the sleeping twins, then back at the vampire king. Then we come back, and we take Sterling down. Silas smiled. It was a slow, wicked smile. The smile of the predator who had finally found a mate worthy of the hunt. Agreed, Silas said. We will make him regret the day he learned to spell my name. But as they prepared to leave the vault, a phone rang. Not Silas's phone, and not Tessa's. It was coming from inside the twins' duffel bag. Tessa froze. She walked over and unzipped the side pocket of Leo's bag. She pulled out a sleek black burner phone. It was ringing. The caller ID simply said, Mr. Sterling. Tessa looked at Silas. Silas's face went pale. Leo doesn't have a phone, Silas whispered. He does now, Tessa said, answering the call and putting it on speaker. Hello, she said, her voice icy. Ah, Miss Reynolds. Sterling's voice oozed through the speaker, smooth and smug. I see you survived the initial audit. Impressive. I assume Silas is rushing you to the London safe house. Go to hell, Sterling, Silas growled. Now, Silas. No need for hostility. I just wanted to save you the fuel. Sterling chuckled. You see, I didn't send the assassins to kill you. I sent them to flush you out, to make you run to the one place you think is safe. There was a pause. The London house isn't a sanctuary, Silas, Sterling said softly. It's a trap. And thanks to the tracker I sewed into your son's favorite teddy bear, I know exactly where you are right now. Click. The line went dead. Tessa dropped the phone. She looked at the teddy bear sticking out of the bag. He knows, she whispered. He knows everything. Silas looked at the door of the vault. He didn't look scared anymore. He looked resolved. Change of plans, Silas said, his voice deadly calm. Where are we going? Tessa asked. We aren't running to London, Silas said, unsheathing a dagger from his boot. If he wants a war, we will give him one. We are going to the one place he will never look. Where? The Wolflands, Silas said. We are going to the Lycans. The border of the Adirondacks was a wall of white. Silas's black SUV roared through the snow, the engine straining as they climbed higher into the territory of the North American Lycan pack. You're serious? Tessa asked, checking the bandage on Leo's arm. You and the werewolves have a blood feud that spans 3 centuries. Exactly, Silas replied, his eyes fixed on the road. Sterling knows my friends. He knows my bank accounts and my sanctuaries. But he knows I would rather walk into the sun than ask a Lycan for a favor. That makes this the only place he can't predict. The car was suddenly surrounded. Huge, shaggy shapes emerged from the tree line. Wolves the size of ponies, their eyes glowing amber in the headlights. The SUV skidded to a halt. A massive grey wolf stepped forward, shifting mid-stride. In a blur of cracking bone and stretching skin, a tall, rugged man named Gunnar Vance, the alpha of the northern pack, stood naked in the snow before pulling on a fur cloak. Silas stepped out of the car, hands raised. Gunnar, I come to invoke the Treaty of 1704. Gunnar growled a sound that vibrated in Tessa's teeth. You bring a human and your whelps into my heartland vein. You have 10 seconds to explain why I shouldn't tear your throat out. Because the High Council's reach is expanding, Silas said, and if they perfect the Spell-Weaver cure using my children's blood, they won't stop at vampires. They'll hunt the wolves to extinction next. We have a common enemy, Sterling. Gunnar looked at the car. He saw Tessa staring at him, her hand protectively over Mia's head. He saw the fire in her eyes, a human who wasn't trembling. The Nanny has spirit. Gunnar noted his voice, a gravelly rumble. Fine. But if a single drop of wolf blood is spilled, I'll feed you to the pups. The trap was set. 2 nights later, Sterling arrived. He didn't come with a few assassins. He came with a private military company. Black helicopters descended on the clearing, their searchlights, cutting through the blizzard. Sterling stepped out, wrapped in a pristine cashmere coat. Come out, Silas. I know you're in the lodge. Give me the twins, and I might let the human live as your pet. The door of the hunting lodge creaked open. Tessa stepped out alone. They're not here, Sterling, she said, her voice amplified by the mountain air. Miss Reynolds. Sterling sighed. Always the hero. Where is Silas? Behind you, Tessa whispered. The snow itself seemed to come alive. Silas materialized from the shadows, his blade at Sterling's throat, before the mercenaries could raise their rifles. But Sterling didn't flinch. Do you think I'm a fool? Sterling sneered. Sniper, take the shot. A red laser dot appeared on Silas's forehead. But before the trigger could be pulled, a massive howl ripped through the sky. The snowdrifts around the mercenaries shifted. 50 Lycans hidden by the blizzard and their own primal camouflage pounced. It wasn't a battle. It was a slaughter. The mercenaries' high-tech weapons were useless in a flurry of fur and fangs. Silas forced Sterling to his knees. You sold my family for a profit, Silas hissed. I did it for progress, Sterling gasped, his face turning blue. The world needs to be rid of your kind. Then start with yourself, Tessa said, walking down the steps. She held the silver music box from the nursery, the one that had belonged to Isadora. She pressed a hidden latch. It wasn't a music box. It was a storage device for Isadora's final spell, a failsafe. A pulse of violet light erupted, washing over the clearing. It didn't hurt the vampires or the wolves, but it reacted with the synthetic enhancements Sterling had used to extend his own human life. Sterling withered. His skin turned to ash, his eyes clouding over as the magic stripped away his stolen years. Within seconds, he was nothing but a pile of dust blowing away in the Adirondack wind. The silence that followed was heavy. Gunnar and his pack retreated into the shadows, a silent acknowledgement of a debt paid. Silas turned to Tessa. The twins ran out of the lodge, throwing their arms around her. For the first time, Silas didn't stand apart. He stepped forward and wrapped his arms around all three of them. "Is it over?" Mia asked. "For now," Silas said, looking at Tessa, looking at her. "But we have a lot of work to do. We have a council to dismantle, and a nursery to rebuild." Tessa smiled, leaning her head against his chest. "I think I can handle that, as long as I get a raise." Silas chuckled, a warm, genuine sound. "5 million isn't enough. I want dental," she joked, "and a vacation, somewhere with a lot of sun." "I'll see what I can do," the king whispered, kissing her forehead. The Vane estate would never be the same. The graveyard shift was over. The era of the human queen had begun. And that is how a human maid did the impossible. She didn't just survive the vampire king. She gave him something he hadn't had in centuries, a reason to live. The Vane twins are no longer the monsters of the East Coast. They are the heirs to a new world, raised with a mix of ancient power and modern boundaries. But the High Council is still watching, and the shadows are never truly empty. If you enjoyed this journey into the dark heart of the Vane estate, make sure to hit that like button and share this video with someone who loves a good twist. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a chapter of our dark romance chronicles. What would you do if you found a tracker in your teddy bear? Let us know in the comments below. Until next time, keep one eye on the shadows.